College's creative writing series of poetry reading by Diamond Forde. Afterwards, there will be a Q&A session, and comes in the back, the Shipyard Forde College's bookstore will be selling copies of one of her poetry collections, Mother Body. Tonight's reading is sponsored by the Georgia Poetry Circuit, a coalition of 10 colleges and universities across the state housed by Forde College since 1998. Now, without further delay, it is my honor and privilege to introduce our visiting poet, Diamond Forde. Forde is the author of 2 poetry collections and has her work published in several poetry and literary magazines. Her first published collection of poems, Mother Body, was published in 2021, which contains poems that explore an interconnected exploration of trauma and agency, held within a body defined by its potential to be a mother. The Forde also manages to make it about a celebration and ode of the Black woman's body. This collection of poems was nominated for the Kate Tufts Discovery Award and the winner of the Saturnalia Poetry Prize in 2019, and has gained a massive amount of rightful recognition due to the themes Forde presents throughout each piece. Her most recent collection, though, the Book of Alice, was published just this year, which houses poems focusing on the meaning of lineage and survival through the perspective of Forde's grandmother, Alice. Each poem holds an incredibly strong message about the importance of family history and why the exploration of grief is essential in understanding the actions of those who came before us, which Forde explores the delicacy of thoroughly while still having emotional beats in between. This collection of poems was nominated and won the Academy of American Poets James Laughlin Award. Some of her other accolades include being the Furious Flower Poetry Prize winner in 2020 and a Ruth Lilly Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship recipient. Forde also serves as the interviews editor for Honey Literary and is currently the assistant professor at North Carolina University. Inside of the Book of Alice, you will discover a myriad of poems pertaining to Forde's family history and the environments that each generation grew up in, reflecting in their actions and attitudes for the generations that come afterwards. It presents the troubled times that Black women had to endure in order to survive the South of the Jim Crow period, in which people looked for any reason to disregard Black women without a second thought. And Forde is able to capture these moments that are both melancholic and reflective through all the pages of the collection. Forde additionally achieves a unique form of diversity within each poem, as each piece has a different yet unique structure that is done with a purpose and intentionality. Even though without my own sentiment and adoration of these poems, I leave off with this. Just as others have reviewed these poems, Forde is able to use a combination of her engaging experimental use of structure and insincerity in wanting to present a real story about familial legacy built on survival. As Charisma Price detailed in her description of the collection, Forde is a photographer mapping in the landscape of survival. The Book of Alice takes an unflinching look at the beloved matriarch passing down her gospel. And without further ado, please let me have the pleasure of introducing you to Diamond Forde.
Before I start reading some poems, a quick let's just say introduction to how I do my readings, right? So thank you so much for being here tonight. I know that many of you are here because you are definitely interested in poetry, especially my poetry, right? And so, I know you're not. And so how I'm going to ask you to kind of be an attentive listener, right, is that I'm going to ask a little bit of something from quick second, I don't want you to imagine me as a poet. I want you to imagine me as a chef, right? And in particular, a chef who is going to serve you up your favorite meal. So do me a favor, close your eyes right now. And I want you to imagine your favorite plate of food. It could be a bowl, whatever it is. I want you to imagine it right now. I want you to imagine the smell of it, the taste of it. I want you to imagine holding that in your hands. Do me a favor, open your eyes. Shout it out. What food did you imagine just now? Tell me.
Fettuccine Alfredo.
I hear a couple of chicken Alfredos, absolutely. Right? Tacos and sushi. Fantastic. Right? For tonight, right? I want you to imagine me as a chef. And it's my job to serve you up some good food for the soul. And I want you, when you hear something tonight that sounds like good food, I want some feedback. So I just had you imagine your favorite food. And if I served you up a plate or a bowl or what have you of that food right now, how would you react? What noise would you make?
Wow!
That's exactly the kind of enthusiasm I Ideally, I would say, yes. Let me hear some There we go. Now, I know that we like to think about being a good audience member as listening silently and attentively, right? But it takes a lot of risk to be up here. Princess can attest to that, right? It's a lot. It's risky being up here. It's terrifying, right? And I, as a writer, and a poet especially, have a very fragile ego. And for tonight, my ego is now your responsibility. What does that mean? Again, I'm a chef. And so when you hear something tonight that sounds like good food, I want to hear it. I teach college. You cannot interrupt or distract me. Right? So when you hear something that sounds like good food, one of the ways that you can tell me this sounds delicious to me is by making that sound. Let me hear that again. Beautiful, right? And we are in a church, and so it also feels appropriate that you would have some other options for yourself, right? If you go to my church, for instance, one of the ways that you can praise the good moment is you can stomp on the floor. Let me hear you stomp. Beautiful. One of the personal favorite go-tos for poetry readings is that we hear a little bit of snapping. Let me hear some snaps. Very nice. And then, if the idea of making sound absolutely scares the shit out of you, that's okay too. One of the things that you can do is tap your heart for me. Beautiful. And so once again, as I'm speaking up here tonight, I want to know when you hear something that sounds good to you. When you hear that good thing, what are you going to do?
Make a sound.
Do it now. There we go. Thank you so much. All right, so to get started, I'm going to read a few poems. Actually, in case you're the kind of person who's like, hey, how long do I have to sit here? I have 11 poems for you. 11 poems counting down. Right? And the first 3 poems that I'm going to read are from my first book, Mother Body, and then I'm going to go ahead and switch gears and read some of the newer work. Why? Because I've had that Mother Body book for a while now, and I'm kind of tired of reading these poems. Right? So this very first poem is the very first poem in the book. It is called Blood Ode. Fat girl knits herself shaving in the shower, resents the water that will carry her blood to sea. Blood, worthless currency, cannot buy a country but becomes it, platelet stitching into streets. Fat girl weeps for the blood that won't return. How many mothers have tried such a homecoming? Sons and daughters inking the tarry streets. Fat girl becomes a mother through her looking, has seen too many children mangled by a sense of justice. She carries somebody's child in the crater their death creates inside her. If she could just reach deep enough, if she could piecemeal her own plum, how many layers would it take to make a bulletproof lung? Fat girl mourns the blood muling a persistent path through the drain pipes. The blood must be taken. Let there be core coral glittering like gemstones at their feet, dolphins pitching foam and arcs out from the sea. Let there be air enough. That girl could be a mother, threading the impossible journey of her blood. You don't have to make noise between each poem. This is part of the reason I tell you to make noise during the poem, right? Because sometimes I move fast. Catch up, right? The last time you are close to your body. You're at the table where family dinners have to happen. Your stepmother tells you again that you're disgusting. This time because she caught you scrubbing panties in the bathroom like your aunt taught you before you were too poor for hygiene. Your father, who is past his past already, is not at the table and wouldn't be because this isn't family dinner. She lists all the reasons you disgust her. You're surprised she doesn't mention your mother. She mentions your mother when she wants to hurt you most. She's never without your mother on her tongue. Your mother is barbed wire hurting both. You want to ask which part of this is wrong, but you already know it is you. It is why when you wash your purple printed panties in the sink, you hope the steam will swallow the miracle. You remember your mother in a ratty blue bathrobe before your father was synonymous with money. Your stepmother would never wear that bathrobe, would never touch anything that feels like poverty on the palms. She will never hold you. So this is the last poem I'll read from Mother Body, and then we'll switch gears a little bit. This is, on the way home from a business trip, fat girl pulls into McDonald's drive-thru in a town she'll never see again. So when the attendant, anonymous in a macrocosm of microphones, asks Fat Girl if that completes her order, Fat Girl adds a McFlurry. Finally freed from shame's ballet in her throat. Fat Girl pulls to the window and chitters like a murmuration of starlings. They both know Fat Girl can't afford this meal. Fat's a currency. The nickels and dimes of a kilogram, and Fat Girl, wealthy already, but when the attendant hands Fat Girl her bag, they speak only the sticky sap of thank you, please, and the world sweetens to saucer. Fat Girl returns to the uptick of traffic, shuts her burger's wrapper, the crinoline slit reveals the golden wheel of bun beneath. Yes, Fat Girl loves herself too. In the mirror, Fat Girl sections herself into flavor. She cups her stomach like a soy ginger flank, brushes her biceps, and imagines the marbling of Wagyu steak. Love, too, is hunger. Fat Girl sinks to her steering wheel, then shrouds a nail through reckless teeth, uproots a sesame seed. Oh, Fat Girl, you are perfect in your longing. Who hasn't wanted to be filet mignon? To melt in buttery love on beloved tongue. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears and read a couple of poems from my new book, which is called The Book of Atlas. It just came out January 20th, which is very exciting. And some of the students that I met with earlier today have already heard a couple of these poems, so you're going to hear it again, right? And I like reading these poems, especially when I'm in the South. I was just in New York last week, and when I read this poem and I talked about the thing that I'm going to talk about in just a second, they were looking at me like I was sprouting bats out of my butt, right? So you're gonna get it in just for a second. So one of the things that you should know is that this book is really fixated or focused on my grandmother, and in particular telling my grandmother's story. And the reason I was trying to do this is because I was living through different life circumstances that were kind of cutting me off from myself in ways that I didn't even know who I was anymore. And so one of the ways that I was trying to write back into myself is by kind of trying to understand how did I become who I am. And one of the ways that I did that is I wanted to reach back into my own kind of personal history, and I started spending more time with my grandmother. My grandmother died back in 2007. And the life circumstances that I was living in then didn't allow me to grieve her, and so I say this book is my opportunity to grieve her more than a decade late. But I reached back into those stories about my grandmother, and I was trying to write what I call the creation myth. And the reason that I was interested in creation myths is because I was reading this essay by Thomas King, and he talks about how the creation myths that we're introduced to guide the way that we understand the world. Right? And in particular, he was talking about the book of Genesis, right? We're familiar with the book of Genesis, yes? Right? The idea that God created the world in 7 days. And he argues that this has kind of created the backbone of Western society and our ideologies, right? That we have this authority figure who kind of creates the rules, that he creates and structures order, and creates order out of chaos. And this guides the way that we kind of move through the world. It guides our understanding of the world. And I'm very interested in that. I was like, okay, so what are the stories that guide the way that I move through the world? And I reached back to the story about my grandmother, Alice, as a creation myth that created me. And what you need to know about my grandmother is that she was born in the 1930s. She grew up in the Jim Crow era South. Right? And she was also a sharecropper's daughter. And sharecropping is a kind of leftover from the enslavement system. And she had to pick cotton every day of her life. And she told herself, because she hated it so much, that the first man to ask her to marry him, she was going to do it just so that she wouldn't have to pick cotton anymore. And she meant that. Because here comes my grandpa Harry, who sees this beautiful woman with long hair, he falls in love, and he says, let's get married, and she's like, hell yes, I'm out of here. Yeah, this is about the 1940s, okay? And one of the things that my grandmother had to do is she had to prove to his family, right, that she could take care of his precious son, that she could be a good wife. Now, I am in the South. Quick show of hands. How many of us have ever had a biscuit before? Yeah, I tried that in New Jersey and it failed. Right? And so you know what a good biscuit is, right? You know a good biscuit, yeah? You ever had a bad biscuit?
Oh, yeah.
You ever tried to make a biscuit before?
Yes.
It's tricky, right? There's so many ways when you try to make a good biscuit that you can really F it up, right? Okay, so my grandma's like, I know what I'm going to do. I know what I'm going to do to prove to this family that I can be a good wife. I'm going to make biscuits. Biscuits. And I know, I wasn't there, but I know those biscuits were good. How do I know those biscuits were good? I'm here. So this is that story. This is creation myth, Alice. In the beginning, Alice dusted her counters with flour, bleached enough to cloth the Carolinas. Outside, sky turned blue beneath the croon of well-tuned garden. Its hydrangea hush blushed over breakfast courts. Biscuits blaring their trumpet heads into the heat. Each morning, biscuits in a cotton field proofing like dough. Outside, Alice dodged the nipping stalks, her dress fanning like the unbroken wings of a sandhill crane. Alice dipped to unfix each bowl with a twist and unbent her dark hair lagooning till, fed up, she wrapped the flooding coils into a basket around her arm. In the beginning, Alice and her basket of curls culled the ghastly field, dragged behind the sun like a wet rag to rose dampened the light. At night, Alice simmered in the tub inside her yard, tired in her tin bath foundry hooks, still gutting her spine. Alice sank in white suds till the dark buds under her eyelids ghosted white, and the square tops of her toes grew white, and her voice turned into white foam. The first man to ask me to marry him, I will. A mantra, pinning a spell, charming the sugar in her cracked wheat, her boots, rubber heels, even the dirt-sifting hillsides on the sill. The first man, I will, she intoned, till her tongue wept magic. The first man sprouted water from the spill of her dish. In the beginning, Alice loved the man. His long stride, a lyric, his jaw unhitched for song. He was the copper latch on a lucid of luggage, a chrome frill mirroring the road, and she would marry him, would carry his arias till they burst from her essential dreams with the force of purple bleeding God. But the first man wondered if she could save his human hungers. So Alice reached for the bucket of lard in the icebox, its animal musk glistening up her wrist, and laid the familiar landscape, the powder mountaining her countertop, buttermilk so cold her palm pads pinkly bougainvillea. The secret to making biscuits is nothing like loving a man. The first time my grandparents held hands, Alice dawdled a finger past his rough patches, noticed a callous puckering where the joints met, same spot as hers, but ignored her urge to break open. She had been taught to treat men like dough, to never overwork them. But a touch too much was a risk, could warp the golden bread into discs like biting into a cotton wool fist. This lesson must be true, Alice said. Because what did she know about love except the silent corners a man left when he'd gone? So the next poem I'm going to read is the very next poem in the book, right? And so this is, again, me reaching back into my personal history to kind of think about what are the inheritances that I carry now, right? And that some of those inheritances aren't always physical. And I ended that poem talking about the silent corner of a man left when he'd gone, and I'm ending it that way because I'm thinking about my grandmother's dad, my great-grandfather, right? And you don't know my great-grandfather, and I don't really know him either, right? But I do know that he was a piece of shit, right? And in particular, what you, again, need to know is this is the 1930s. My great-grandfather was a white man, and my great-grandmother was a black woman, right? And that kind of interracial intimacy is illegal in the 1930s. In fact, the last anti-miscegenation law would be off the books in Alabama until 2010, I believe, right? Okay. And so what my great-grandfather used to do, so that he and my great-grandmother can cohabitate, is he used to pretend to be a door-to-door salesman, right? Just so that he could have an excuse to go in her home and the neighbors wouldn't look at it funny. And so he used to go door to door, pretend to be a salesman, so he could slip inside and they would cohabitate. And out of that union came my grandmother. And my great-grandfather would leave. He would never go back. He would abandon the family he created. He would go and marry into a white family and create an entirely new family of his own, and he would never look back. And this is why I say he's a piece of shit. And so this is another origin story shaping the origin of me. Because that absence would affect the way that my grandmother was raised, and would affect the way that my grandmother raised my mother, who in turn raised me. This is origin story, the father. The father bought a pair of Oxfords, cream-colored, copper heels beaming like pennies, and kept them in a box in his car. And the father would cart the box in his car to the street, and the street watched. And the ladies on the porch shucking coal beans from their stems watched, and the wind was dragged to the gray tops of the houses stuttered and stopped, and the father, hot, walked the watching street with a shoebox in his arm. The father knocked at the first house, and at the first house was Grace. But Grace didn't like shoes in the house to scuff and creak on the hard floor. She lived quiet. Spoon soup, but never touched the bowl. Mopped, but wouldn't hum sweet serenades to the suds, even with a husband not home. Grace swore silence was survival. Watched mice scurry the crawl space as a girl noticed only the squeaking one's cog and the moist machinery of the tomcat's mouth when Grace saw the father at her door. Necktie noosed around the milky giblets of his neck, she refused to open, not even for the sun to tiptoe in. When the father, hot, walked the watching street with a shoebox in his arms. The father knocked at the next house, and at the next house was Joy. Joy walked in midnight in the moonfall. Joy whistled from the breath of many men, hips wide as lampshades. Joy held her own light, shined in the frame while her kids left the living room behind, laughter rattling the rails, and the father said, "Good evening." And Joy regarded him with the confidence of women taught to be fruit on a high branch, and the father blanched, fumbled the box top in his arms, asked, "Can I sell you some shoes?" And Joy said, "No, sir." And her voice jangled like a pocketbook full of Susan B's capital in her honey jar, saved herself bread for her own garden. And the father, hot, walked the watching street with a shoebox in his arms. The father knocked at the last house, and at the last house was love. Love, too, was beautiful. Even when summer settled over her like a witched field of rye, love ushered the father inside, poured him coffee and a clap of cream in the tapered mug he liked. Love didn't mind, the father didn't sell shoes, not really. This was 1930, before the father was allowed to hold love like a thrasher in his snow-baked palms, but how he longed to hold her. God rustled in her skirts, and he had to know what heaven looked like, had to kiss the open face of her brown lips, the gospel budding between them, and when she spoke his name, the father felt divine, like the power he held was his the whole time. And together, father and love brought forth creatures in their likeness, called one daughter, took the Oxfords from the box and left them for her, while God plucked a hangnail from his thumb. And the daughter, in her hard shoes, watched her father leave with a shoebox in his arm. I'll read like one more poem from the book out, so we'll take a quick break and we'll dive back in. This next poem is a bit of a request. It's for Princess. This is called Clever Cornbread, or How to Keep the Daughter Humble. There are recipe poems that appear periodically in the book, and this is one of them. Clever Cornbread, or How to Keep the Daughter Humble. Ingredients: 2 cups cornmeal, full pan baking fat, 2 cups powdered milk cold, a teaspoon of baking soda and salt and egg, rustled warm from the hen, 3/4 cup of butter, salt, a sugar pinch, a cast iron screen hot. Directions: 1. Soak the cornmeal in the clabber jar overnight to loosen its toothsome bite, but only if it's stone ground, and it will be. Hurled upon the word each day, she'll learn to dodge the pebble sky, too. And when she smiles, show her the pig, the Yorkshire, glazed, bored in the mud, she'll hope to play, to ride him in the blue to the pond you love, the old hole your daddy dug back when you, too, was proud, ashy, unabashedly loud, dodging the rough hands you call brothers back before the catfish learned to bend like reeds, trying to hide from your greasy gathering, half your daddy's family bunched under a fish fry's wing. Her fingers rake against the hem on her hip, a twitch, a wish to itch the swine behind his flitting ears, swat her, not hard, just enough to startle her from wanting, then show her mercy, cut the neck so clean the blood forgets to leak into its red skirt. She'll tremble, awestruck in her feathers, tell her this is the first of many blessings. 3, fry the bacon till it kicks, sputtering the pig's last will and testament. These leeches, the foundation on which you'll build. 4, crack the egg, mix with steady hand, and you'll be steady. So steady she'll mistake you for a god. Your father, just as unflappable, couldn't move from drink till drink moved him from you, and pastors say he'd watch him, but you hope God's good enough to shirk the curtain the day you conceive. 5, the dream, your daughter, taffeta curled and thrown into cast iron summer. She runs, he fixed to catch her, but she sizzles between your fingers like drippings, dress flapping, footsteps fervid and far flung. She's an auric heat of laughter, a scene bright sun, and you bake in a kind of devotion. Remember the flickering embers of your daddy's eyes turn cold. If you could smoke the light blinking on her back, if you could bear the burn, an old flame winking in her smile, maybe, just maybe, you could keep her. I'm going to read a poem that doesn't appear in any book that I own. But before I do this, I need to know, there's this little known artist that I'm going to reference in this particular poem, and I need to know if you know it. Anybody know who Dolly Parton is? Okay, good. Okay. Are you familiar with her, again, a very unknown song, Jolene? Great. If I asked you hypothetically, right, if you could sing that little portion where she like says her name 3 times in a row, do you think you could do it? Do you think so? Let's test it out, right? mother made sure I knew very early is that I cannot hold a tune, right? That particular gift did not come down to me. And you do not want me to inflict my singing upon you, especially when I have a mic. So what's going to happen, right, is that I'm going to read this poem, and there are two portions near the end of the poem that needs to be sung, right? And rather than me doing it and inflicting harm upon you, I'm going to ask you to do it. So I'm going to read through most of this poem, and we're going to get to near the end, and then you're going to see my little hands go up, right? And just like you did before, when you see that third finger, I need you to sing for me. Sound good? All right. This poem is called The Great Equalizer. Is a house party, vodka soaked, stuffed sneaker to sneaker on the back porch, smoke shouting out open mouths. Between the nearby leaves, the bod, hot, dark cuts into equal parts like a devil's food cake, while inside, bodies thick lie like icing on others' hips, decadent magic, mastering the reverent tremble in our hands. Somebody tosses Dolly Parton in rotation. Somewhere between Afro beats and my best friend busting like we practicing the floor lane back home, and I think it's a joke. Picture it. Black kids turn bright bell of laughter. We peel from the shadows, hee-haw and holler like we stumbled in the wrong bar. A happenstance we might know. Tripping like guitar strings at the end of a barrel, but we ain't scared. We've always been here. Looking for ghosts between bar stools and dust, praying for a stranger's familiar face to emerge from the arbor slats of the bathroom. Any soft voice with rattling springs, someone to remind us we aren't the only ones left in the world to wound. But I want to tell you about surviving, about my whole crew held like a deep breath in the old school sepia of a single lamp, waiting. Room thrumming with guitar swang and the boot dub twang of morning.
Jolene, 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 Jolene.
Dolly, please, and we damn, trembling, ready to moan.
Jolene, 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 Jolene.
What do we know about heartbreak that ain't their marrow break? There you go, you did it. Give yourself a round of applause. Okay, so I'll move back into the book of Alice. I'm gonna cut that poem, so it's like 1, 2, 3. Are you keeping count? How many poems do I have left, do you know? 4 left. Someone's keeping count. Father. So this next poem is in reference to the story of Lot and his family, in particular, fleeing Sodom and Gomorrah. The idea was that they were not supposed to turn back. The wife did, and she became a pillar of salt. Right? And so this poem is in her voice. It's called Lot's Wife. The truth is, I do it again. Turn into the winking eye of a city flushed with fire. I hope I burn this time. My body curling like the ruffled apron on the hook, the pen scratched books, the candles cinder to scents. At least let me be turmeric, cardamom, saffron sprinkling from heaven like a banjo from Mars. I want to be a spice men burn for. I want to be architecture, the pillar of a temple where men line to floss their tongues on the salt snowing like trust. Salt cathedral, salt palace, mountaintops crusted with salt, country whose borders are diamonds of salt, or the salted coast of a continent, its oceans full of the bones of women like me, whose tombs are the only homes we keep God. Give me a name worth remembering. How many poems we got left? 3. There you go. There's a lot of pan persona poems in this particular book. This next one is written in reference to the story of Noah, right? If you don't know that story, although I'm sure you probably do, we're in the South right now, right? It's the story of the flood. Noah had that ark, right? usher those animals on 2 by 2. And part of this project, the reason that it's focused on the Bible in particular is because I am the kind of person who believes that poetry can bridge us to the humanity in us, right? And in order to kind of reach for my grandmother, I had to reach for the only poetry she knew and understand, which was the King James Bible, right? And so as I'm reaching into this Bible and trying to read it the way that my grandmother reads it, there's this really great scholar named James. And she talks about how Black women in particular are taught to read the Bible through a kind of marginalized lens, that they tend to kind of gravitate to the characters that we overlook the most when they're reading and engaging with that book. And so I'm thinking about this story about Noah, right, and I'm thinking, who is the forgotten character in that narrative? And maybe it's my own investment in fast studies, or maybe I'm just a weirdo, but I kept thinking, you know what would suck? There was a pig on Noah's Ark. Right? Because, yeah, even if I have to humor the fact that like, you're an animal and you completely understand what's going on, right? The idea behind it is that I get to be ushered on to this ark, right, to be saved, and then my legacy, right, my generational contribution to the planet is that I get to become bacon. And I was like, that's fucked up. So this is the sow speaks to Noah. And what should I think of this? Mercy? And a mere monk languishing on a boat gone nowhere, the tusk and musk of livestock, gassy camels, chickens flicking wet flecks of shit, giraffes, and they long necks forever knocking somebody flat on the asses. The sheep bleating all night, and that somebody stay watching me piss, eat, and sleep, reminding me that I'm the voice of a generation. As if that should make me humble. As if that might make me forget that the only sky you've given me is a puddle snag on the sharp edge of candlelight. It can't be a journey that takes you from home and never gives you back. Is it a gift that I survived to send my kids to slaughter? Better home is the mouth of their mother. Yes, I will eat my children before I let their buttocks butter into fat back, better to gore to the next soft meat, unseed my children, chestnuts rendered free, their spirits you can't digest, and this ain't the last flood, no. Your generations drown my kin in white noise daily, but did you know a pig can swim for miles if it goes? And I'll turn my whole ass out to open ocean, kick a tremolo of waves behind my whole brood, then awash this land. O maidens of love, when the water done making slop of this earth, will root and raw done kick wherever our pink hooves please outnumber the men who penned us here, feed to our bellies bulge into boulders, be too large for any hook to hold us. How many poems we got done? Very good. Thank you so much for holding on, Raymond. Thank you for giving me your attention. I appreciate you. I can't write about the ocean without it being about slavery. But what if I want to fuck the ocean? I saw on a certain Atlantic trade my desire to dip my oyster moist in the saline face of her. I'm saying I want to straddle the sea with both hips slapping like rafts, unshackled from kelps, clasp wrapping my legs, held to dive without needing to net bones from the sea floor and shore. Maybe this is a queer poem. Maybe the ocean is Mommy Wata, and I want to tongue her trenches or hold her swells in my palm small shell. Maybe I want to stew in the primordial brew from which life oozes, but do not read me from the sea slick with afterbirth. This isn't baptism or beast, not communion nor kink, and do not think of ships on the horizons, ghosts in their suits. Instead, a cast of blue crab scuttling the seabed, or seagrass licking worship from my feet, or the California sheephead, a carnivorous species of fish who ain't afraid to feel the black urchin on his back and see. We both know what I did there. Yep. Made, metaphor, dangerous, and recklessly misfit in this, the thicket of trying to unbring